A mugger breaks into a woman's home and tackles her. The woman tries to call the police, but it's too late. The assailant takes control of her and slaps her across the face. The woman was left defenseless and attacked. After the assailant leaves, the woman does not choose to call the police but calmly cleans up the broken dishes on the floor. She then went to the bathroom to take a shower. The next day, she went to the hospital alone to be checked for HIV, but refused the doctor's offer of blocking pills. Then she changed the locks on her house and went to the shop to buy pepper spray. At night she sleeps with a hammer in her arms. Even when her son asked her about the cut on her face, she said she had fallen on her bike. Independent in nature, Leah is the owner of a gaming company. She is perceived as cold and unemotional by her employees. She tries to get her life back to normal as if nothing had ever happened. But that day, black-clad thugs break into her home again, hurting her for no reason at all. But this time Leah doesn't choose to call the police, and even tells her friends at a dinner party that she was assaulted by a stranger in her home in a relaxed manner. Her friends urged her to call the police, but Leah didn't feel the need to do so. Her distrust of the police and journalists was all over her, and it all started when she was 11 years old. Her religious father had gone mad and killed 27 people in quick succession. When the police and journalists arrived, Leah was burning evidence with her father. The evidence was so overwhelming that her father was caught red-handed and sentenced to life in prison. But the nightmare didn't end there for Leah. The photo of the little girl who helped her demon father destroy evidence is still being discussed. Even now that she is the owner of her company, she still has people dumping rubbish on her as she sits in the restaurant, cursing her viciously before leaving. And all this stranger hate is something Leah is used to. The shadows of her childhood had made her not trust anyone so easily and had given her this independent nature. So Leah decided to catch the black-clad thugs on her own. Leah was still working late at night at the office when a sudden message on her phone made her feel scared. A message from a stranger who even knows the color of the clothes she's wearing. She suspected that someone was watching her in real time, so she gets up and takes a look around the office, where she finds that only the photographer is still working. The photographer had never been on good terms with Leah, and Leah suspected that this man was the black-clad thug, but she had no real evidence, so she had to give up for the time being to keep him from finding out. But as she walks home, she realizes that someone is following her. This woman is being followed. Instead of hiding in the house, she goes around the back of the car, smashes the glass and sprays mace into the woman's eyes before she can see him. The familiar screams made Leah freeze. But the man who had been following her was her ex-husband. A few days earlier, her ex-husband Kevin had heard her being assaulted at the dinner table. He feared for her safety, so he made a point of watching the neighborhood for anyone suspicious to appear. Only he didn't expect that he would be turned into a mugger by Lydia instead. He thought that was the end of the drama, but to his surprise, the next day, a malicious video of Leah appeared on the company's computer. This reinforced Leah's belief that the photographer had done it. Only someone from the company could have easily planted the virus on the computer. So she approaches Paul, the programmer, and asks him to help her find the suspect in the dark. But the results are surprising. In the evening, Leah arrives at Paul's computer desk and discovers that the source of the spoof video is none other than the good Paul. Paul has to argue that he didn't do it, but that the photographer did the spreading of the video. Leah doesn't get angry at Paul's sophomoric explanation, but tells him to take off his trousers. Leah found out that he wasn't the one who had assaulted her and left. By the time she drove home, she found a crowd of people at the door. Mr. and Mrs. George rushed to inform her of the situation, and it turns out that George has found a burglar trying to sneak into her house who has been chased away by George. George wanted to accompany Leah into the house to see what was going on. He looked around the house, found nothing unusual, and was ready to leave. Before he left, he told Leah to call him if there was any trouble. The warmth of George's gesture made Leah fall in love with him. She began to follow George's movements, watching his life through binoculars at the window. She was looking forward to seeing him again and was desperate to have more contact with him. Soon it was Christmas. Leah, who had always been reluctant to ask for help, came to George's house and invited them to a Christmas party. And the seating arrangement is clever, with George sitting next to Leah. The woman, in an attempt to attract the man's attention, sneaks her leg under the table and touches him, and the man doesn't resist. He can't help but look at the woman in front of him, who he has actually had feelings for a long time too. The party ended with a flirtation between the two of them. When Leah returned home again, she found that someone else had been in the room. The unidentified liquid on the sheets and the profanity on the computer make Leah furious. She rips the sheets off the bed, but doesn't call the police about the apparent break-in. In the evening, there is a sudden gust of wind outside and George arrives unexpectedly. He is worried about Leah's safety and comes to the house to see if she needs help. The wind suddenly becomes stronger and the window has to be closed by two people. A flirtatious position leads to feelings that should not be there. Leah leaned into George's arms, but George didn't want to go on. He fled without saying a word, leaving Leah alone. That day, the masked thug comes to the door again, ready to assault Leah again. Leah felt the scissors that had fallen to the ground and stabbed the man's hand and ripped off his mask. To her surprise, the man in black was the same George who had captivated her. She held the scissors up to keep George away and drove him out. But Leah still didn't call the police. By the time she got to work the next day, a feral cat pounced on her and caused an accident. She was stuck in the car and couldn't move. She tried to call her friends for help but couldn't get through to them. She had to call George, who came over quickly. He took Leah home gently and bandaged her wounds carefully. Leah didn't tell him off. The next day Leah and her son were shopping in the supermarket when they met George alone again. They met up for dinner and her son got drunk. At this point George suddenly invited Leah to the basement with him. At this point, George is no longer hiding the fact that he is a sadist and that only violence can make him feel good. With that, he pushes Leah to the ground and prepares to commit another crime. And Leah looks at him in a very cooperative manner. This was a turnoff for George, as it wasn't what he wanted. Instead of blaming him, Leah played a game of chase and run with George. George put on his mask and broke into Leah's house again, and Leah fled in a panic. As George pins Leah down and prepares to assault her, Leah's son appears. When he saw his mother being bullied, his son grabbed a tool and knocked George out from behind. At this point George took off his mask and stared at Leah in shock. Seeing the smile on Leah's lips, he realized he had been tricked. It turns out that Leah had set this up, pretending to be submissive before allowing her son to kill George. When the police arrived, Leah hid the fact that she had been assaulted several times before. Her son had acted in self-defense and the police had to acquit him. It's all over and Leah has finally got her revenge.
If you knew what this man had done, you would have tortured him to death. The man sneaks into the girl's room and locks the door behind him. He came to the girl's side. He asked her if she would like to play a game of dolls. The girl was happy to think that the man wanted to play with her, but little did she know that this was the beginning of her nightmare. He made the girl be the doll and he was the girl. The doll impersonator is not allowed to move or speak, and it was a secret game between the two of them that no one could know about. With that, he took the girl to the toilet. The naive girl had no idea what the man was doing, and yet this unspeakable doll game lasted for 10 years. The girl's name was Anna. She had a talent for dancing that was out of the ordinary, and the man, Jill, was her neighbor and Anna's father's best friend. The simple Anna dislikes the game, but she doesn't know how to express it. However, Gil's behavior becomes more and more bizarre. Gradually, Anna began to resist Gil, but she didn't dare to tell her parents. She didn't dare to tell her parents because in their eyes, Jill was a good neighbor. He not only helped out a lot, but also brought Anna gifts from time to time. The parents didn't notice anything unusual about their daughter, and with their busy schedules, they were unable to pick up Anna. The job was left to a kind neighbor, although Anna was very reluctant to have Jill pick her up from school. Her mother did not listen to her explanations and criticized her severely. She said that Anna was ungrateful after all the gifts Jill gave her. In the evening after school, Anna had to get in Jill's car. She kept her head down in the car and didn't dare to make any noise. But the man still had an evil look on his face. He asked Anna to take her trousers off. Anna was helpless, but she didn't dare to resist and did as she was told. Back at home, Anna threw herself at her father. Her father didn't notice anything unusual about her and was happy to talk to Jill. Because of Anna's hard training and her extraordinary talent, she soon passed her dance exams at the Academy of Arts, which meant she had to go to school elsewhere. Anna was happy that she could finally get away from Jill's special game. Before saying goodbye, Jill calls and invites her parents to a holiday in the mountains to celebrate Anna. But as her parents didn't have time to go, they asked Anna if she was going to play, but when they saw the flower towel Jill had given Anna was covered in sticky stuff, the mother was instantly angry and thought Anna had disrespected the kindness of others. Anna tried to explain it was from the doll game Jill played every time she came over, but her mother didn't give her the chance. She simply told Anna to go with Jill and experience life in the mountains. Even though Anna tried to resist, It was no use. On the first night in the mountains, Jill put her baby to bed and came to Anna's side. Then, with impunity, he began to lend his sinful hands. A week later, Anna arrives at the art school. As the school did not provide a dormitory, she had to stay with someone else's family. The dark walls were not to her father's liking. But Anna was happy here she could finally get away from that man. But it wasn't long before Anna received a package from Gil. The postcard said he would be visiting her the following week. Instantly, fear and anger came back to haunt her. The mother saw her 10-year-old daughter washing her underwear. However, it wasn't menstruation due to premature growth. It was because of a perverted neighbor. Anna wanted to tell her mother everything. The mother is too busy with work to care about her daughter. She thinks it's normal for girls to have their periods. But why didn't she think about how her daughter got her periods so early? At a family gathering, a friend saw how close Anna and Jill were. He is kind enough to warn Anna's father, but the father was unconvinced. Because Jill was his best friend and he trusted this neighbor, Anna's father explained that Jill only had 3 sons and had always wanted a daughter. When his friend heard this, he didn't say anything more. Tired of playing, Anna got up and went back to her room. Jill followed her shortly afterwards. As soon as he entered the room, he locked the door behind him. He was about to take Anna and play with her dolls when Anna's father burst in. He asked Jill what the doll game was. When Jill couldn't answer, he pounced on her and was about to teach her a lesson. A voice interrupts him. It turns out that it was all just Anna's imagination. Once again, Jill wants to drag Anna to play the doll game. Anna refuses. This is the first time she has refused, but the man didn't care about her refusal. He pushes her into a small room to play with the game. 8 years passed and Anna grew up, but the memories of her childhood were a nightmare. She took to alcohol and drugs to numb herself. She had no friends at all because she was often so angry and crazy. The only thing that hasn't changed is her love of dance. The dance teacher saw that Anna's dance was so full of madness that it seemed to speak of her anger. After class, he left Anna alone. The teacher asked her what it was that kept her living with the painful memories. Maybe talking about it would open her up, but Anna's heart was already closed and she wouldn't talk to anyone about it. She spent her days numbing herself. Either she was too tired to get up from a show, or she was on a drinking binge. The stress and mental anguish made her want to kill herself more than once. Her first attempt was to go to a psychiatric hospital. Here she met a responsible psychiatrist. Under her constant guidance, Anna began to talk about her miserable childhood and tried to accept everything that had happened. She did change. She met Carl at a performance. Carl's gentle and considerate nature soon wins Anna's heart. But no matter how passionate they were, they never took the final step. Carl was always very tolerant of her. As long as Anna loved him, he was willing to trust her. But Anna is afraid that if she tells her childhood memories, Carl will abandon her. Anna's mother dislikes the stubborn Carl. She thinks Anna can find someone better, someone as handsome and rich as Jill. The party ends on an awkward note. On the way back, Carl can't stand Anna's mother's mean-spiritedness any longer. He's also fed up with Anna's drinking and secrecy. He feels that Anna's heart is closed. She hadn't opened up to him for 2 years. To this day, he doesn't know if Anna loves him and why she won't go further with him. Carl knows that Anna has had relationships with many men before him. Why did she not want to go further with him? Anna's emotions flared up at this moment. After an argument between them, she began to cry as she watched her boyfriend's back. She hated herself for her disgusting past, which made it impossible for her to live like a normal person. The psychologist told her the best way to get over her past is to face it. But how easy is that? With a lot of coaching from her doctor, Anna decided to overcome her fears and confess to her parents. But no sooner had she arrived home than she found Jill's family visiting. Now Jill is a grandfather. Looking at the twin girls, Anna is terrified that they will suffer at Jill's hands. She finally found the courage to tell her parents what had happened to her as a child. Her father was so angry that he wanted to kill him now. How could a brother of many years do such a thing to his daughters? In his home, he had hurt his daughter. The father felt a great deal of guilt and remorse. But the mother, who had also heard the news, was frighteningly indifferent. Her words were even more chilling. The mother thinks her daughter is lying. She can't believe that her handsome and wealthy neighbor would do such a thing. How could Jill be a pervert when he was a gentleman and the object of many women's affection? but the father asks her directly what the pervert looks like. Anna is disappointed with her mother. Her mother suggested that the matter should be settled in private. The charge of pedophilia was a very serious one, and it would not be good for anyone if it went too far. Anna never thought her mother would be so concerned. Her daughter had been violated, and she was still thinking of her neighbor. The father dragged Anna straight to the police station to file a report. He had to send Jill, the bastard, to jail. After telling him everything, Anna's heart finally dropped. Her mother mocked Anna for ruining a family. She was worried about how her neighbors would get on, whether Jill's daughter-in-law would ever bring her children back, and what would happen to his wife. Anna is completely devastated. Why should a mother think of everyone but her own daughter? The horror is that Anna is not the only victim. Through continuous forensic investigations, the police discovered that Gil worked part-time as a private tutor every week, and his students were all girls, every single one of them. Even Jill's sister was among the victims. In the face of so many accusations, Gil argued that he had not forced them. They hadn't rejected him either. Looking at his unrepentant face, Anna also went to the witness stand with determination. She was brave enough to tell her side of the story. The court soon found Gil guilty. He was punished as he should have been. Anna is able to let go of the past and start a new life with Carl.
A girl who sleeps in a strange bed for 2 hours without her clothes on. She wakes up with $50,000, but she doesn't know who or what was done to her, who's in the room or what's been done to her. The only requirement of the job is that there must be no blemishes on the skin, and no scars or tattoos on any part of her body. After the interview, Lucy's snow white skin pleased the boss. She got the job. Lucy is an ordinary college girl. Because her family was poor, she had to work 3 more jobs to pay her tuition fees and loans while saving money. Lucy has tried various jobs, working as a medical research rat, organizing documents and washing dishes in a restaurant were all part of Lucy's daily life. And that's not all. Lucy had to take on the job of cleaning the toilets in the shared house in order to save money. Lucy uses her free time to the fullest. She even allows the men to flip a coin to choose who will have her. After all this, Lucy could only sleep in her cot, but because Lucy was always behind on her rent, her best friend and her boyfriend treat her badly and even evict her from her room. Lucy has to keep looking for a good-paying job. One day she calls an ad in the newspaper with a very attractive salary. Lucy arrives at a fancy club, dressed to the nines. The executive in charge of the interview looks very dignified. In order to be successful in her quest for a good-paying job, Lucy wants to look her best. The interviewer told Lucy that the job was very simple. All she had to do was wear a dress and serve the rich and famous. She was paid by the hour and would receive $350 an hour. The supervisor also assured Lucy that nothing excessive would happen during the job. Lucy heard that the hourly rate for 1 hour's work would be worth a week's pay for a week's worth of dishes. She didn't give a second thought to the interviewer's request. She happily agreed to the job. The interviewer could see her excitement. She kindly reminded Lucy that the job was not stable and permanent. She told her to think of it as a short-lived opportunity to make a fortune and pay off her student loans. She told Lucy not to think about making a living from this job for long. But Lucy still didn't heed this advice. Lucy went to get a pedicure and massage so she could do her job better. That night Lucy was taken to a luxury villa. She is instructed to go into the fitting room. The girl's first time as a special waitress. She took off her dress and wore very little clothing. The restaurant is filled with waiters just like her, pouring drinks for powerful old men. In one night, Lucy was paid as much as a month's work. That's how much money you get just for pouring and serving. Lucy was excited. She was beginning to slack off at her regular job. The meager salary was nothing in her eyes. She had to have a car to drive her around. Gradually, Lucy grew to despise the part-time jobs she had been doing, packing papers and serving dishes. Instead, she took special service jobs very seriously. With her beautiful face and perfect figure, the interviewer gave her more and more tasks, and Lucy was delighted. In addition to service work, nightclub work is also fast-paying, so Lucy spent all her time apart from studying and serving waiting for work in nightclubs. The reason she needed the money so much was not only to pay off her school loans, she also needed the money to pay for her sick boyfriend's operation. He had to stay at home to recuperate. Lucy works all the time to pay for the two of them, but Lucy doesn't want to give up on him because in a big city, he was the only person in the city who could open up to her. They shared a similar past. Neither of them had ever experienced the care of a family. Two lonely souls. The only way to keep each other warm is to be near each other, but now her boyfriend is ill. His health is getting worse and worse. The thought that her boyfriend might leave her at any moment. Lucy can't help but cry. Her desire to make money was getting stronger and stronger. That day the interviewer called. She had been offered a new job as a sleeping beauty. All she had to do was sleep in a strange bed with no clothes on. The pay would be many times higher than before. Lucy was hesitant to accept the generous salary but did so. The driver drops Lucy off at the appointed place. Lucy was uncomfortable. She then saw a young girl being helped out of the doorway. It didn't seem to be as simple as the director had made it out to be. Lucy walked into the villa. The job was even simpler than last time. Lucy followed her supervisor's instructions and changed into a specific nightgown. She then drank the soup that put her to sleep and lay down on the bed with her eyes closed. The supervisor reassured her. Once again, she was assured that nothing would happen to Lucy while she was asleep. The job was odd, but at least it was easier than being in a nightclub. Lucy lay down on the bed and soon fell asleep. The boss brings up an elderly man. The old man looks at the sleeping Lucy and starts to take off his clothes one by one. He lay down next to the girl. By the time Lucy woke up again, it was the next morning. She had no idea what had happened last night. There was a slight weakness in her body, but it would soon return. Lucy didn't think about it. She had rented herself a luxury flat on a high salary. She began to lose herself in the dream of a rich life. She keeps offering to call her boss to take the job of sleeping beauty. But what she doesn't know is that, in the time she was asleep, one elderly client after another comes into the room, on sleeping pills. She couldn't feel the presence of anyone else. Until the day Lucy woke up to find several bruises on her body. She begins to sense that something is wrong with the job. When Lucy arrives at her boyfriend's house, she finds that he has passed away. Lucy is devastated, but life goes on. She remembers the bruises again. She is desperate to find out what happened while she was asleep. So she takes the car to the villa. She asks the lady in charge for answers. I need to see what goes on in there. Just once. How can I expose them, to be frank? Please, Clara, I'm sorry. The boss's hard-hitting attitude made Lucy think there must be a secret. She felt she could find the answers on her own. Lucy went to the shop and bought a pinhole camera. She's going to drink the ecstasy, as is her work routine. While the boss was gone, Lucy pulled out the camera that she had hidden in her mouth and hid it on the side of the bed. The next day, the female interviewer came into the room. She went up to test the old man's breath. She found the old man in the bed dead. The interviewer was very calm. She suddenly remembered something. She squeezed Lucy's foot and it was also very stiff. It seemed that the worst thing had happened. She jumped on top of Lucy and kept shaking her and slapping her face. She tried everything she could to wake Lucy up. Finally, after repeated first aid measures, Lucy woke up. She touched the body beside her before she finally realized the nature of her work, and the film ends with her hissing in terror. Sleeping Beauty was released in 2011. The film is an eerie, a dark film with a taboo theme. Sleeping Beauty is the title of the film. On the one hand, it hints at the girl's special job. On the other hand, it is a beautiful fairy tale metaphor. In the fairy tale, it is the prince who wakes the princess up with a kiss. But in the film, it is the corpse of the old man next to her that wakes the girl from her dream of a high salary. And while she is asleep, the clients seeking service are mostly rich old men. In the sunlight, they have a glamorous identity and untold wealth. But on the other side of their hearts, they also have a desire for youthful vitality. They can only try to satisfy some sadly dark desire in the sleeping young girl. When the head girl brings Lucy back, her illusions were completely shattered. Perhaps then Lucy's consciousness will awaken too. The rotten life will finally become a thing of the past. Once again, the film's theme is symbolic. Those who should sleep will sleep, and those who should be awake will finally be free from their dreams.
Daniel locked his daughter in the basement for 24 years and forced her to give birth to 3 children. What's incredible is that this is a film based on true events. Daniel was the head of the family and a strong man. He would not allow anyone in his family to oppose him. But on this day, his youngest daughter Sarah defies him. She sneaks out of the house in the dark of night to go to a rave with her boyfriend Christopher. By the time Daniel finds out, she was already having fun at the party, listening to Christopher's romantic guitar playing. It was one of the few happy moments Sarah had. Early the next morning, seeing her sent home by Christopher, Daniel was furious, but the rebellious Sarah chose to ignore it. She had had enough of her father's tyranny. She went to her room and told her mother and Lily she was going to travel the world when she turned 18 and leave this stifling home. Daniel, who was outside the door, heard her. He decided to give Sarah a little punishment. He went into the basement and opened the door where he was going to carry out his dark plan. When the other family members left, he pretended to call on Sarah to help him carry the boxes. Sarah did as she was told, but as soon as she had put the boxes down, before she could react, Daniel locked the door. Despite Sarah's repeated cries, Daniel didn't do anything. Sarah opened the suitcase and found it full of her clothes. It was then that she finally realized that something was wrong. So she confessed her mistake to Daniel through a small hole while trying to enter the coat to open the door. But Daniel even blocked the hole with a cloth. Now, no sound could come out of Sarah. And at that moment, Sarah's mother had called all of Sarah's friends since she disappeared. But there was no news of her. Even when the police came to the house, they simply asked a few questions and closed the case. 4 days after Sarah was locked in the basement, Daniel reappeared. She pushed him away as he closed the door, then prepared to escape. But what she didn't realize was that there was a second door outside the basement. Her actions pissed Daniel off completely. He grabbed her by the hair and went straight back into the chamber. Daniel then told Sarah, "Don't ever press the code, because if you enter the code 3 times wrong, the electricity in the basement will stop and the ventilation fan will stop working. This is your punishment for disobedience." And he told Sarah that she had to trade her body for supplies. When Sarah didn't answer, he slapped Sarah in the face. And the next thing that happened was the last thing anyone wanted to see. On the 7th day of Sarah's incarceration, her boyfriend Christopher approached her, but Daniel told him Sarah had run off with another man. Christopher was left disappointed. As the days went by, it was Sarah's birthday. Daniel brought her a cake and some supplies. Then he handed her a red dress. He asked Sarah to show her gratitude like a tame animal. He told Sarah that she could make demands of him, but that there was a price to pay. Sarah didn't hesitate to offer to leave, but was rejected outright. Sarah had to get another one. Half an hour later, she was lying on the floor, her eyes vacant as she looked at the clock on the wall. That's what her body had been traded for in the blink of an eye. A year had passed. Sarah's belly had grown and she was about to give birth. She hurriedly looked through the books Daniel had prepared for her and crouched in a corner. She sat on the floor and wailed in pain, but there wasn't a doctor around. Fortunately, with a cry, the baby was born. Looking at her newborn baby, Sarah's face finally broke into a smile. She named her daughter Mary, and Daniel didn't feel any guilt when he saw the baby. Instead, he felt that Sarah should thank him for giving her the right to be a mother. Sarah didn't answer. She looked at the food Daniel had brought her, and there was a fruit knife in it. She picked the fruit knife up and put it down. Clearly, she knew this was her father's way of testing her, and by now she had been successfully tamed. 4 more years passed. Sarah is pregnant again, but Daniel got a promotion and a pay rise. In the evening, the family sat down to dinner in a bright living room. Sarah is still locked in the darkness of the basement. The mother suggests a private detective to find her daughter, but Daniel is furious. Perhaps out of guilt, he brings a TV into the basement. This finally gave mother and son a bit of fun in their dull lives. Little Mary was able to learn about the outside world through the television. Over the years, Sarah's boyfriend hadn't forgotten about her either. One day, he came to Sarah's door and accidentally met her sister Lily. They talked about Sarah. Lily realized that Daniel had been cheating on her, so she told her mother about it. Her mother is furious and gets into an argument with Daniel. Daniel went after her to argue, but accidentally dropped his keys on the sofa. Lily saw this. She picked up the key and went to the basement. Before she could look for it, Daniel came back. He grabbed Lily's keys and scolded her to leave. And so it was. Sarah missed her freedom again. 10 years had passed. Sarah had another child. But as they grew older, their curiosity to explore the world was no longer satisfied by mere television. But Sarah was patient. She would leave her work and play with the children every time. Gradually, after another year, Sarah gave birth to her 3rd child, but there was no room for a 4th in the tiny basement, so Sarah offered to take the youngest child up to raise him. Daniel had to agree, and so the child was quietly placed on the doorstep. The mother saw the letter Sarah had left. She knew Sarah was safe, so she didn't notice the letter underneath the baby. Instead, Daniel found it. As a result, Sarah is again subjected to cruel treatment. Shortly afterwards, Daniel lost his job. After losing his job, he vented exhaust fumes into a secret room with the intention of poisoning Sarah and her 3 children inside. Only his grandson shows up just in time to interrupt his actions. This was the 18th year. He had kept his daughter captive. During this time, Sarah was pregnant with another child. 2 other children were growing up, especially Mary. She looked even better in makeup than Sarah, so she was soon targeted by Daniel. Out of motherly instinct, Sarah warned him not to lay a hand on her daughter, only to have Daniel turn off the vent in retaliation. It's raining hard outside. The rain was seeping through the cracks into the basement. This gave Sarah a chance to get out. She dug an opening with a spoon and used a torch to call for help. This was seen by a neighbor walking his dog, but unfortunately, the neighbor told Daniel about the incident, and this time Daniel punched and kicked Sarah despite her pregnancy. Sarah had a miscarriage. The other two children were in the midst of their rebellious adolescence. They blamed it all on Sarah's weakness. They had a big fight, lying on the floor. Sarah recalls her time with Christopher. She finally reveals their origins. The angry son wants justice for his mother, but they've been locked up in the basement for so long, malnourished. He was no match for Daniel. He was soon beaten by Daniel. It wasn't until 5 years later that things finally turned around. That day Mary had an asthma attack. Sarah begged the bereaved to take her daughter to a doctor and said the words "Daddy" that she hadn't said in over a decade. This seemed to awaken the only conscience left in Daniel's heart. He agreed to the request. Sarah carried her daughter out of the basement. Looking upstairs at the familiar room, her eyes were filled with longing. She decided to take this opportunity to leave. She took her daughter to the hospital. After the doctors performed CPR, her daughter was in no danger. The nurse then handed Daniel a form to fill out. She also asked about Mary's past medical history. Daniel's answers made the nurse suspicious. The nurse made an excuse to leave, but in reality, she was looking for an opportunity to call the police. Sarah didn't miss the opportunity to leave. She inadvertently spilled water on the case sheet. While Daniel was changing the forms, Mary leaves quietly and asks the police for help a short distance away. Daniel reacted and came after her, but it was too late. He was thus brought to justice. The people in the basement were successfully rescued. They were given light and freedom, and Christopher is still in love with Sarah after all these years. They were reunited in the days that followed. He takes Sarah around the world and makes good on his promise. Life is far more frightening than a horror film, and reality is far harsher than a movie. This film is based on a true Austrian event. In reality, the victim was younger than Sarah. She also gave birth to more children than Sarah. But the good news is that the bad guys will eventually get what they deserve.
In class, this girl twists and turns her body in seductive poses. Despite being teased by her classmates and scolded by her teachers, she continues to wear heavy makeup and age-inappropriate clothing to school. What's surprising is that 10-year-old Rita's mother is the reason for this behavior. Rita's mother, Hannah, is a photographer. She leaves Rita in the care of her grandmother because she works all the time. Despite this, Rita still has a great and warm image of her mother in her heart. One day Hannah suddenly asked her daughter to be her model. She unwrapped Rita's twists like a doll and then helped her change into a beautiful dress herself. Rita was happy, but her innocent smile displeased Hannah. What she wanted to see was the innocent look in the young girl's eyes. So under her mother's guidance, Rita's movements became more sensual as she leaned back and then brushed her forehead with her hand. She did her best to play the part of the good girl. Rita worked hard even when she wasn't modeling to please her mother. She practices the poses her mother taught her during class. After class, Hannah made a rare visit to pick up her daughter from school. But before she even left school, she took off Rita's coat and changed her into a mature woman's dress. This provokes ridicule from her classmates and Rita is embarrassed. But her mother said she was noticed because she was beautiful. She then took her daughter to see a street painter who was interested in Rita's pictures. He paid her mother a good amount of money and Rita was happy to see that she was helping her mother. So Rita started to be more active in taking pictures with her mother. Under Hannah's guidance, Rita learns to pose like an adult in a sexy way. But the more compliant she became, the more Hannah demanded. This time, she brought out a disfigured mannequin for her daughter to hold. Rita takes a step back out of fear, but then gives in to the cold look in her mother's eyes. Hannah was very pleased with the photos and managed to get her daughter and her mother into a high society party. From her conversations with other photographers, Hannah learned that this dark and forbidden style was the order of the day. So her demands on Rita became increasingly strange. She even made her daughter open her legs to show her private parts in the mirror. She wants to make her daughter a poisonous flower, because that's the beautiful little princess she has in mind. Rita doesn't agree with her mother, but she has no choice but to comply. But in this compromise, Rita gradually forgets her own heart. The heavily made-up young girl in a revealing gown flicks her legs in front of the camera. The seductive look in her eyes makes it impossible to tell that she has just turned 10 years old. The photographer of the photo shoot was the girl's mother. After the photos were released, Hannah suddenly became famous and Rita, as a model, was also noticed. But when confronted by the journalist, Rita put her hands on her shoulders and then leaned into his arms. Much to Hannah's satisfaction, because Rita's gesture just stimulated the artist's hypocritical aesthetic. The contrast between the young body and the sexy movements was disgustingly called art by them. The photos were auctioned for tens of thousands of dollars. With the money, life at Rita's house was getting better and better. But Rita's life at school was not so good. Her classmates saw her picture in a magazine and laughed at Rita's disgrace. It was then that Rita realized that her mother's photographs might not be the art she claimed to be. Soon after, Rita was taken to England by her mother, this time to be photographed as a couple by an aristocratic young man. Everything was going well at first, but then Hannah suddenly asked her daughter to take her clothes off. When Rita doesn't want to, she takes them off for her, which is a bit difficult to accept. Next, her mother even asked her to take off her underwear. Now Rita is completely devastated. She had accepted so many humiliating requests because she wanted to be alone with her mother, but now she realized that her mother didn't love her at all, but was a monstrous control freak. She was just a tool for her mother to make money. Looking at her broken daughter, Hannah was still arguing that it was all art and that only a vulgar person could understand it. Rita has had enough of this rhetoric and she won't give in anymore. Hannah didn't expect the doll she had been controlling to resist, so she began to do everything she could to make her happy. First she takes Rita to the playground, and then she gives her lots of expensive luxuries. But what Hannah doesn't realize is that Rita doesn't care about any of this. All she wants is the simple attention of her mother. No one understands Rita, and Rita has to go home to her grandmother for comfort. But when Rita gets a good grade, the first person she wants to share it with is Hannah. But when she comes back to find that her mother has a new model, Rita is abandoned once again by her mother. In order to regain her mother's attention, she has to pick up her dress and choose to compromise again. This mother is so sick that she takes pictures of her daughter while she is in the toilet. Not only that, but she forced her daughter to take large-scale photos for money, and she calls this perverted aesthetic art. Under her mother's pressure, Rita became increasingly anxious. She even began to hallucinate, imagining that someone was trying to persuade her to escape. And when she saw the pictures in the magazines, her shame reached a fever pitch. Now Rita can no longer tell if she is playing the role of her mother's good daughter or a pornographic model. To bring her mother to her senses, Rita decides to end it all with her own death. However, Hannah still clings to Rita and wants to die with her. And that's when the sad news comes that her grandmother has died. The only person in the world who had ever cared for Rita was gone, and Rita's heart was dead. Not only does she no longer resist having her picture taken, but she takes on the appearance of an adult and plays with the older children. Eventually Rita's abnormal growth drew the attention of child protection organizations. They asked for Hannah's custody back, which left her devastated, because until now, she was convinced that she loved her daughter. She just didn't know that this wasn't the way a mother's love should be. When the social worker came to visit, Hannah wore a conservative short-sleeved dress to show that she and her daughter had a good relationship. Rita didn't want to cooperate. She was dressed in her usual mature clothes and swearing as usual. Seeing this, the social worker called a halt to Hannah's filming, but Hannah agreed, but then sold her daughter's photos to pornographic magazines. This time Rita broke down and screamed like a wild animal, then slapped herself to try to ease the pain she felt. But she knew that this would not mean anything to her mother. She had to go to a child protection organization alone, but the social workers were limited in their ability to do so. Not because they didn't want to destroy the photos in advance, but because they had no right to do so. No sooner had Rita left the premises than Hannah arrived. To this day, she doesn't see any problem with what she did. She's a photographer and it's her job to take pictures. Where did she go wrong? Her biggest mistake was to forget that she was a mother. Hannah is also a poor person who has never had a mother since she was born, because she was born to her grandfather, who was also her father, who forced her to give birth to her daughter. Her sister is also her mother. It was a miracle that she survived such a monstrous childhood. As Rita listened to her mother's story, she felt compassion in her heart. She asked her mother if it was true, but Hannah deliberately said it was a joke. Losing her last hope, Rita decided to save herself. She managed to get herself into juvenile hall by snatching a lady's bag from the roadside. It was the only way she could think of to get away from her mother at the time. Despite being trapped in a juvenile facility, Rita was no longer at the mercy of anyone. But when she learned that her mother had come to visit her, Rita still made a conscious effort to run away, because she no longer wants to be tied to her mother's love. This is the end of the film. This girl has a maturity that is not befitting her age. She wears lipstick, high heels and poses in a variety of mature ways under the guidance of her mother. When she becomes so skilled, she can no longer return to her normal life. The saddest thing of all is that the girl's age and mind are not capable of helping her to resist her mother. So even though she knows that motherhood is not like this, she is powerless to break out of the trap. What can she do without financial means but to depend on her mother? So after expressing her powerless rejection, she can only try to escape her mother's control by giving herself up.
Like a bull in heat. But by the next day, children playing by the bog found the man's body. It was initially thought that the man had fallen from a 60-meter fire tower. The time of death was between midnight and 2 a.m., and the autopsy results confirmed this. Strangely, however, there were no fingerprints or marks at the scene, and the red fibers found on the victim's jacket were not from his own clothes. But before the police could investigate, the townspeople were saying that the swamp monster must have done it. Hearing the commotion, the police quickly went to the girl's house and found a red hat, which was confirmed to be the red fibers left on the victim's clothes. The police then proceeded to arrest Anna. Despite the danger everywhere, she did not hesitate to dive into the water, but executed immediately. However, in defiance of the public's inherent prejudice against her, Tong, a kind-hearted lawyer, decides to defend her pro bono. As a child, she had an entire family of 7 living in a wooden house by a swamp. The children had the same gentle nature as their mother, but she had a violent father who was always beating her up. When night falls, Anna often finds it difficult to sleep in this atmosphere, until one day, her mother, who had been a constant victim of domestic violence, chose to leave. Soon after, her older siblings left in the same way, leaving Anna behind because she was too young. From then on, her father felt guilty for what he had done. He was even kind to her for a while, taking her to the town's only grocery shop, but she was shy, having never been outside the house before, and was encouraged by the kind owner to go to school. When she returns home, she finds her mother's dress and finds the courage to go to school. But when she faces strange looks from passersby, her lack of confidence makes her give up. At this point, Tong, a lawyer, tells her not to worry about what people think and that everyone has the right to go to school. With his encouragement, Anna went straight to school, but she was constantly taunted and insulted by her classmates, which made her storm out of school in anger. She ended her only day at school. Since then, she has been learning wilderness survival skills from her father. She loved collecting animal feathers, studying the habits of various creatures, and waterfowl feeding. But she would often get lost in the swampy lakes and was fortunate to meet Tate every time to guide her. Tate, her childhood friend, is always there to stop her when she is being abused. Anna is overjoyed to receive a letter from her mother, but her father reads it and, despite Anna's objections, destroys it and tells her that her mother will never return. So he burns everything that belonged to her. The next day, her father also leaves the house, leaving Anna alone. In order to survive, she follows her father's example and digs up shells to exchange for money at the town's grocery shop. The kind-hearted black couple seem to be aware of this and take care of her. Not only did they find her the right shoes, they took the time to teach her how to write and gave her lots of old clothes that fit. Time flies and Anna grows into an adult. One day a strange man came into her life. Anna always avoided him but always received a gift from him. Sometimes it was a feather of her favorite animal. Sometimes it was a seed of a plant. The two seemed to have formed an understanding. This time, however, the man came too early and ran into each other. After a short conversation, it turned out that he was her childhood playmate, Tate. He then began to teach Anna how to write and draw, and Anna seemed to return to the good old days of her childhood. Anna gradually opens up and takes him to her cabin for the first time. But when he saw the room full of paintings and the unique insights marked on them, Tate was even more impressed by Anna. He thought Anna had a great talent for the study of flora and fauna. Later, they fell in love. Am I your girlfriend now? Do you want to be? But Tate's efforts to get into university meant that the two would be separated for a while. One is a young man with a dream, the other a reclusive girl deep in the swamp. Even though Tate promises never to leave Anna, she fears she will be left behind. Tate promises to return next month on the 4th of July, and he will meet her on the beach to watch the fireworks. Before leaving, he gives Anna a list of publishers and encourages her to send her notes and drawings in exchange for money, so that perhaps she won't have to dig for shells for a living. After they part, Anna devotes herself to painting and writing. It was time to meet him, and she put on her makeup and a beautiful dress and went to the beach to wait. But she waited all day. When night falls and she sees the fireworks, Tate still doesn't appear. Anna became a little disappointed until she woke up in the morning and was completely desperate. She didn't expect to be abandoned again by her boyfriend after being abandoned by her family as a child. Disappointed, She returns home and tears away the memories of her expectations. Her first love affair was over as the area became popular with developers. It was soon turned into a tourist attraction. It was also here that Anna met Ian, the rich man who had accidentally fallen from the tower in the first place. Ian is a real playboy. One minute he says he only has eyes for Anna and takes her up the tower to look out over the marsh. The next moment, he's chatting flirtatiously with another woman. Although he doesn't know what the various creature paintings mean to Anna, he does know that company is important to her, perhaps after her first good love experience. Anna believed in love again. The two soon became closer. Anna even gave him a necklace of seashells. However, a few days later, Tate suddenly returned to the marsh to visit Anna. But when he saw what he saw, he looked shocked and even disappointed. The next day, Tate runs into Ian bragging to his friends about how he has conquered Anna. Angry, Tate and Ian get into a fight. He then tells Anna that Ian is a scumbag. Little did he know he would be turned away by her.
You're the one who left me. Who didn't come back when you promised. Who never came back. You didn't even write to explain or even to say if you were alive or dead. You just disappeared.
I know, and I'm so sorry, Kai. You have no idea.
You weren't man enough to face me.
But love hurts again. That day, Anna overheard that Ian had affiance and had already set a date to get married. Anna is devastated and vows never to believe in love again. But life goes on, and Anna slowly emerges from her affair and begins to contact publishers to find a future for herself. Just as life was settling down, Ian approached Anna and asked for her forgiveness. When Anna refuses, Ian prepares to assault her, but Anna is able to fight back and escape. She then hides on the boat to avoid Ian, who has already gone through her house. But at night, when she heard the commotion, she thought it was Ian coming to retaliate. But she didn't expect Tate, who had been watching over her, to do so. Seeing Anna's bruised face, he seemed to understand everything. He reassures her to start again and gives her a red hat on his way out. The next day, however, Ian's body is found by the bog. What is going on here? It turns out that Ian and Anna had had an argument before he died. As she fought and ran away, an old man at the lake witnessed it. In the courtroom, he tells the story of what he saw, but the prosecution accuses Anna of premeditated murder, luring Ian to the tower after an argument and then making it look like she had lost her footing, and then destroying all the footprints and fingerprints. Tom, however, Submiscution then produced the red hat found at Anna's house to confirm that it matched the red fibers on Ian's clothes. But Tom then argued that the red had belonged to Tate, who had fought with Ian, and that it was not surprising that the red fibers were on his clothes. He gave the red hat to Anna afterwards, and she had an alibi. The day before Ian's death, the witness saw Anna take a bus to the city, and the reason for her visit was to meet the publisher and attend a dinner together. She also had breakfast with the publisher at 7 a.m. the next morning. Ian's death took place at around 2 a.m., so clearly Anna did not have enough time to commit the crime, because Anna did not stay at the hotel arranged by the publisher, but chose to stay at the one closest to the bus station. Both sides had their reasons, and the jury was not in a position to decide whether Ian was killed. It was then that Ian's mother gave a clue. Before the incident, her son had told her that Anna was breaking up with him. Also, the Baker necklace Anna gave Ian was not found on the body, so Anna had enough motive to kill him. She knew she couldn't have him anymore and killed Ian, but convictions are based on evidence. The police didn't find the necklace at her place, so the case was heavily weighted in Anna's favor, and it was all just prejudice and discrimination against her. There was no actual witness to her deliberate murder. The reality is that she was in a bog until the day Anna died. Tate was going through her belongings when he accidentally found the necklace in a book. Then he realized everything, but to keep his wife's secret, he throws the necklace into the lake. This is the end of the film. Abandoned by her family as a child, the girl lives alone in a swamp, having never been sheltered by society. She chooses to protect herself in this way.